Central Region Chief Program Officer. Going to give you a quick introduction before turning it over to our science, service, and culture teams for the update. So before we get started, I wanted to just quick share with folks some lessons learned going into this and where our future state is going. So next slide, please. Great feedback, first of all, from the field on the current roadmap. When you put in your FY 22-23 input, we learned a lot of lessons from that. One of the things I wanted to share with you is that people had questions about what goals meant and completion meant. And really, a lot of what you're going to learn today is completion of a specific activity is what we're tracking in the current roadmap. Our goals right now are steps and not necessarily end states. As this, again, the roadmap evolves and helps us evolve through the process of continuous improvement. For example, one of those activities is our roadmap ambassadors. Our roadmap ambassadors was a goal for this year. We've established our roadmap ambassadors in each office. However, we're still in the process of determining exactly what the roles, capacities, and the lessons learned are from those ambassadors. They've already done some questioning in the office and worked with the folks to see what the concerns are so we know how to best use that position. So the goal was completed to establish them, but the role of the roadmap ambassadors is still evolving. So just a quick explanation of how the roadmap activities sometimes work. Other thing I want to throw out there is we need more questions and more feedback. The amount of feedback we did receive was fantastic. It was much more than we received in the last two roadmaps combined. So thank you for that. And hopefully you'll continue to use your roadmap ambassadors and feedback form on the webpage to give us your thoughts, your concerns, so we can answer them. But a last reminder I want to put up there also is the roadmap, its scope of the roadmap, and its sphere of control. There are many things that we can't control in the Central Region roadmap. The roadmap focuses on what we can do, and things like the IT infrastructure are well beyond what we're able to do. So just bear in mind as we release the new roadmap that there are limitations of what we can do. So what does the future hold for us? Well, the FY 22-23 field input has been evaluated by the new teams, and that's the new science, service, and culture teams that have been established. And we'll establish new teams to give people opportunities to participate in roadmaps going forward. The first draft is being, excuse the typo there, being ready for first review by the teams. We'll be sending that back to them shortly. And the plan is to have it released, the roadmap released in full in September, with the goals identified not in the roadmap, but in that version of the fiscal year 22 Central Region Annual Operating Plan, divisional goals, and sub-regional goals. So that's where we're heading in the future, but let's catch up with where we are now. So I want to turn it over to Bruce Smith with the science initiatives.
Great, thank you, Scott. So for the science portion of this morning's webinar, great opportunity to reflect on activities in Central Region under the science pillar, one of our three pillars here in Central Region supporting our roadmap. As several of us developed the content for this webinar and reflected on our fiscal year 20 science and training accomplishments, there were several themes that emerged. These themes are shown along the right-hand side of the screen, and they really represent sort of a loose agenda of sorts, summarizing the things that Jeff Mannion, Randy Graham, and myself will be covering this morning. Now, none of those overarching themes should really come as a surprise to you. They're things that we've been working on and will continue to work on. They include leveraging the NBM as our common starting point, continuing to migrate toward probabilistic data and messaging, improving our focus on the near term, promoting shared training opportunities, and doing our best to manage and harness local innovation to improve consistency and efficiency across the region. The next slide, admittedly, is a bit of a mess. It's cluttered and rather overwhelming, and it represents just a small sample of the science and technology we've promoted and really made great progress on here in Central Region over the last year or so. As you look over the slide, you'll see items related to shared training, new visualization tools, forms of new science-based messaging for partners, new NBM probabilistic fields, and new techniques for short-term forecasting. Through a lot of hard work and willingness to remain progressive, thanks to all of you, we've made tremendous progress in Central Region, and we've all got reason to be really pretty darn proud of the science advancements we've made over the past year or so. and many of these things have been implemented across the region, or testing continues. So with all of these initiatives, training, of course, serves as the main basis for all of these advances. So I'd like to turn the microphone over to Jeff Mannion, our regional training coordinator, and he's going to kick things off by saying a few words about how he supports local, regional, and national training. Information comes from every direction, and it's his job, his unenviable task of trying to navigate all of those inputs, filter it, and to make things as manageable for everyone at the field offices with respect to training as possible. So with that, I'll pass it over to Jeff.
All right, great. Thanks, Bruce, and good morning, everybody. If we could go on to the next slide, please. Each August through September, I usually get started in August, we work toward developing the upcoming fiscal year's training guidance memorandum, which is developed for the entire region and shared with all the Cwsus and DOs. And its primary goal is to guide the local office training plans. The initial input comes from our three primary training divisions in the agency, that is the Weather Service Training Center, WDTD, and FDTD. And sometimes it's a little bit of a cat herding exercise in that those divisions may not have their budget for the upcoming year. They may not have their plans fully in place, but it's usually a variety of unknowns that leads to some tough predictions that we try to make for the next 12 months. So we do our best to try to put those together. And then once I have kind of a draft in place, I work with a training team that we've established, and that's been in place, I think now for about 4 or 5 years. And right now it consists of 4 Cwsus, an MIC, and myself. And we try to look at what are our priorities, both agency-wide as well as maybe what we are looking at regionally, what we are focusing on. We try to put those together to come up with a reasonable training plan that looks forward for the next 12 months. Now, one of our primary goals is to make sure that we only focus on those highest priorities for the upcoming year, because we very definitely recognize we don't want to go too heavy on the training aspect. And we understand this year we have asked a lot of our folks, and we thank everyone very much for bearing with us and completing all that training. There's a lot of important initiatives out there, so we've tried to keep it at a minimum, but at the same time, there's stuff that we know that needs to be in there. So, and as you might expect, as we are going through the year, I've always said forecasting the weather is much easier than forecasting what people are going to do. And so we find ourselves having to make some adjustments throughout the year. So it's not a fixed training memorandum once Bruce signs it in September, but we do make some adjustments along the way, as you kind of can see there in the snapshot. And with that, I'll pass it back to Bruce.
Yeah, thanks for that summary, Jeff. As Jeff alluded to, the training comes from every direction, and it's difficult sometimes to manage it and filter it for everyone so that it doesn't become overwhelming, but Jeff does a great job of working with the Cwsus and DOs especially to keep the training on track. I'm going to say just a few words about our Central Region test beds. We've talked about it a lot over the last several months. As everyone is aware, we fielded 3 separate test beds over the past winter: a gridded ESTF test bed, a probability of weather type test bed, and a probabilistic messaging test bed. And you can see the offices that were involved with each of those test beds the past winter. I'll start by describing a little bit of the feedback and results from the gridded ESTF test bed. All of the feedback here up to this point is pretty preliminary, but I wanted to give you just a flavor of some of the feedback. This particular test bed has completed its final report, and we're in the process of reviewing that. You can see the vision for the gridded ESTF test bed. It was to develop, to efficiently and accurately maintain the quality and representativeness of near-term grids via a new enhanced short-term forecast process. As I said, the team report has been released. They found some real nice successes from the test bed. The so-called maintenance mode to kind of maintain those 0 to 4 hour grids as accurately as possible was found to be quite effective. And there was good verification within the maintenance mode, especially for temperature and dew point. However, there are some challenges that are continuing that were learned more about by doing the test bed. there's a need for additional training and awareness of how the process works. It was a new interface, and you can see that graphical user interface on the right-hand side of the screen there that sort of drove the ESTF process. And there was some learning curve associated with making sure folks were familiar with that. That's something that can be improved in the future. There's still some NBM deficiencies in the very near term, especially with Sky and POP. So there's some different approaches that might need to be considered to maintain those grids. And not unlike other parts of our forecast, there's certain issues that definitely maintain themselves in the mountainous areas that are very unique to the mountain areas. So team did a great job led by Steve Flegel, and we're still reviewing the team report to see how we want to move forward with the ESTF test bed. Next, we had the NBM probability of weather type test bed. That team report is still in the works, and just as I did with the ESTF report, we'll release that to all hands when that report is complete. You can see the vision there. It was to leverage and communicate emerging NBM probabilistic information to the maximum extent possible. And much was learned through the probability of weather type test bed. The NBM was found to better represent the P-type as compared to the legacy environmental parameters approach that we've used for the last number of winters within Forecast Builder. So some big steps forward there. However, there were some issues with false freezing rain forecasts coming out of the NBM due to dry solutions in the NBM. But I think from my perspective, the biggest takeaway from the test bed we did for POUT this past winter was that there is expanded dialogue taking place on a national level about how to handle precipitation type within Forecast Builder and from the NBM. And it's a real challenge, but the test bed is really helping to drive a lot of great dialogue that is going to get the whole weather service increasingly on the same page as we approach this particular forecast challenge. So really a nice outcome from that test bed. The probabilistic messaging test bed, you can see the vision there to develop a common messaging strategy and collaboration framework for probabilistic information, starting with winter weather, test new probabilities and ensemble tools and displays, and determine understanding of probabilistic information by forecasters and our core partners. Those of you that worked with that test bed this past winter, most all of you found that the consistent and standardized messaging funnel strategy was quite useful to get everyone on the same page regarding types of messaging tools at various forecast projections and confidence levels to help drive our messaging. Some forecaster concerns were raised, however, regarding the dynamic and larger snowfall ranges, certainly larger than folks were used to with our standard 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 4 to 6 inch type snowfall forecasts. And that's leveraging, of course, the 25th, 75th percentiles, 10th and 90th percentiles. We're finding, though, that those forecasts were not as large and unrealistic as some may have perceived. It's just a new way of displaying information. And we're going to continue to work on that both internally and working with our partners to see how to continue to leverage those dynamic snowfall ranges. One big success that came back time and time again in the feedback was the use of probability of exceedance, really viewed both internally and externally as being a nice way to convey uncertainty within the forecast. So great work by the probabilistic messaging test bed, and that report will be coming forward as well within the next couple of weeks. This is one other final slide regarding that particular test bed that I think is worth sharing, which shows that over 80% of the respondents within Central Region that were involved with the test bed themselves, over 80% thought that many aspects of the probabilistic messaging test bed could be made operational just as is, or more commonly with some minor modifications. So those are the modifications we're making right now to help move that forward. So I want to thank everyone for their involvement in the test bed. Over the coming months, the 3 test bed team reports will be reviewed and discussed. We'll look for opportunities to expand across the region. Perhaps some additional testing will be necessary, but rest assured that any changes we make as a result of these test beds will be implemented only after dialogue and coordination via the Central Region Labor Council. So those discussions will be ongoing here in the coming weeks and months. So again, thanks for everyone's involvement with those test beds. And then lastly, before I pass it over to Randy, I'm just going to say a few words about the Blue Sky Initiative here in Central Region. That started a few years ago with one of our earlier roadmaps, and the opportunities to support blue sky operations continues to slowly grow. But we've learned some things along the way here, some missteps, if you will. I think we didn't accurately convey the initiative by initially calling it a blue sky day. So you can see why I've got that crossed out on the slide there. I think it's more accurate to refer to these as blue sky opportunities. It might be an hour or two on a quiet shift. You've got the opportunity to do some blue sky activities, or it could be a whole shift, depending on the weather and the needs operationally. But we've been able to provide Wednesday guest speaker series opportunities. The twice a year seasonal symposia has been very successful. The remote mesoanalysis initiative, Randy's going to say a few words about that shortly, as well, has been a nice opportunity for blue sky growth. And another initiative that we haven't been able to field quite yet due to our COVID telework operations is the GR2 Cobras training opportunity, which is a displaced real-time training format. We're hoping to be able to field that in the coming months as we begin to slowly reintegrate. We're also looking down the road at other opportunities for some back to basics type training on a whole myriad of foundational science topics that might be presenting itself in an upcoming roadmap. But the one commonality to all these blue sky activities is increased training opportunities, shared training to promote greater consistency, to break down silos and have us all working together more effectively. I'm now going to pass it over to Randy, and he's going to say a few words about the Central Region Remote Mesoanalyst Initiative.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm going to go over a few initiatives that we have going on the science side here. The first one is the remote mesoanalyst support concept that we began testing last fall. So this was an idea, as you may recall, came from discussions with Pat Spoden and some of the Southeast sub-regional Sioux community to give a look at doing some kind of remote mesoanalyst support. So we've implemented this as a test in the fall, and in the spring kind of went full on with it. We have 16 remote mesoanalyst facilitators, or RMAs, and any of them can lead a discussion in the Google chat room and then share information with offices being supported. The initiation request can come from the WFO or multiple WFOs, from the facilitators themselves by saying they're available for a specific severe weather event to lead this discussion and share information with the offices, or from the Central Region headquarters. And so far, we've provided support for 7 events. Our goal for the year was 4, which was somewhat modest, and we wanted to do more than that, but we weren't sure, given the limited number of facilitators that we have, how many events we'd be able to support. So we've already done 7, and they've gone extremely well. There's been a lot of great feedback from offices that have had the support about how valuable it's been in their warning operations. It is a change because you're monitoring a chat with a facilitator. So the facilitator, just to be clear, communicates directly with the offices in a Google chat, while there's a larger Google chat going on in this mesoanalysis chat room, and anybody can participate in the large chat room. And we encourage you to get in if you have availability to watch and interact during the mesoanalyst chat. It's a really valuable learning tool and a great way to share information. You can see on the right there's an example from John Stopcotti from last week, providing support to Springfield and Paducah, where he notes how the HER is suggesting that the line is becoming more north-south, and this, given the level winds, this could support mesovortex favorable environment if that north-south line materialized later on. So that kind of information is really valuable for an office to anticipate the evolution of an event. And if you haven't been in one of the chats, I'd really encourage you to go back into the mesoanalysis chat room number 1 and just read through some of the past events so you can kind of get an idea of the type of support that is provided. One thing about this is there's really strong interest in this concept from outside of Central Region, including Southern Eastern Region. The OPG actually did a mesoanalysis demo last 2 weeks. It was somewhat similar to what we're doing, and then also the Warner Forecast folks have been bumping in the chat rooms as well and sharing some really valuable insight on WAF's output. So really quickly, the focus for the rest of this year is to identify best practices for facilitators and the WFOs, and the big one is to develop a plan to onboard additional RMAs for next year. We'd like to at least double the number of facilitators that we have for next convective season. So that's all I'll say about remote mesoanalyst initiative, which has been very successful. And we'll move on to the implementation of the probabilistic data infusion plan. So this was a goal to implement more probabilistic and ensemble-based forecast tools and thinking into our operations. And so there was 5 parts to this plan. One was the completion of the OCLO foundational probabilistic training, which came out in February. It was on the annual training memorandum Jeff talked about. There's the STI probabilistic and ensemble tools resource page, which we completed last fall with the help of Jim Siebeking, and we continue to update that. That's on the STI webpage under Operations tab. Then there was the probabilistic messaging testbed and the results from that, which Bruce discussed. Vignettes, which I'll talk more about in a moment, and then area forecast discussions. We've been monitoring and keeping track of the amount of time that we reference ensemble and probabilistic output in our AFDs, and just so we can see how, as a kind of a proxy to see how much more this is being utilized in operations from year to year. And Andy just has some scripts that can do that and check on what's available in the AFDs and how we're using those type of terms like ensemble and probabilities and that sort of thing. So the one thing I wanted to talk the most about this is the probabilistic and ensemble tool vignettes. And the idea behind these is to build upon that OCLO foundational probabilistic training that we've all been taking or have completed at this point, and utilize tools from the STI resource page that we developed last fall, and talk about how do you interpret this output? How would you use this? When would you use this type of probabilistic or ensemble information? And how would you interpret it? How would you describe it in an AFD? So we'll provide an AFD example. And then how would you communicate this information to a partner or the public? And so it's kind of the 4-part vignette, and they're going to be short. The target's going to be about 5 minutes for each one of these. They're going to be quick. And some of the topics you can see down below, such as neighborhood probabilities. That module is the first one, and that should be coming out this week. It should be available either today or tomorrow, and that will be sent out, and hopefully you can all check it out. And we'd love to get some feedback on what you think of these as we share them, but we're going to try to share these every few weeks. And they're going to be really short and easy to digest. We'll do conditional probabilities, probability matched mean, and again, it's a way to reinforce the probabilistic training that we've gone through and then talk about how to use this stuff operationally. So another area that kind of goes right alongside with this is the effective messaging of probabilistic information. So if we can go to the next slide. So this is being led by Chuck Greif, and he has a team of us that are helping on this. And so we're going to build a toolkit basically on how to communicate this probabilistic information. There's a few parts to it. One of it is going to be the communication examples that we're going to share in these vignettes that will show proper ways to, best practices basically on how to share this information. And Joe Ripberger and a group at University of Oklahoma looked at 300+ studies covering the communication of probabilistic information. And you can see that image on the right. And this is the percentage of those 300+ studies that covered the listed topic there on the left side of that graph. So public understanding and use of probabilistic information in decision-making, communication using numbers, communication using visualizations, etc. And what they came up with is 100 separate findings that they thought were useful for the Weather Service, and they identified 12 recommendations for us. And we're going to try to blend those 12 recommendations into these vignettes. Then we're also going to take the lessons learned from the probabilistic messaging testbed from that final report that's being worked on now, and also incorporate those into the vignettes. So we're going to try to utilize this knowledge that's out there to share examples of how we can best communicate this information. Then we're going to produce a probabilistic messaging best practices one-pager using how do we use probabilistic information to in risk communication. And again, that will leverage Joe Ripberger's recommendations rather heavily, and then also some examples from the probabilistic messaging testbed. And then finally, the OCLO foundational probabilistic communication training will be coming out next winter, and there's a group of SMEs working on that right now that'll build on that foundational probabilistic training that we're taking this year. And then the next step is communication of that information. So that's the messaging toolkit. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is this modernized forecast process. And there's a lot of discussion going on about the modernized forecast process. And we really need to evolve our forecast process to incorporate these new tools such as probabilistic information and ensemble data. and we need to move away from the deterministic models as our sole source of forecast data. So I really want to leverage probabilistic ensemble tools. And as Matt Jeglin, who I see is on the call, likes to say, we need to change the way we think. We need to think probabilistically. And so this is going to be an evolution that we're going to be going through with the diminishing grid manipulation and more about communication of probabilistic information and providing context and alternative scenarios, et cetera. One thing that Matt likes to say is that probabilistic information does not equal complexity. It does not have to be complex. And so that's one thing we have to get our heads around, to think probabilistically. And so there's a whole group of folks from all the CONUS regions discussing this. We're really talking about moving forward together on this. You can see on the modern forecast funnel on the right, kind of an approach that we've been discussing. It's just an example about how you have the probabilistic and ensemble data information right up front in your forecast process. So that's all I want to say about that. Just know that the regions are working on this together as we move forward into a more probabilistic and ensemble-based forecast process. And I'll turn it back to Bruce.
Great. Thank you, Randy. As Scott mentioned at the beginning of today's webinar, work is already underway for our next roadmap for fiscal years 22 and 23. A Central Region science team has been assembled, and we've met several times to review and discuss the feedback provided by all of you, not only in the science area, but the service and culture pillars. You can see the team members, the science team members listed here. Also listed on the right-hand side are several of the science themes that emerged after reviewing your recent input. And those themes are not necessarily brand new. I think a lot of the feedback that came from all of you was to really improve a lot of the initiatives that have already been put in place regarding science. And in closing, I'd just like to say that over the last few years, as we've increased our emphasis on partner engagement, messaging, and the use of the NBM as a common forecast starting point, I think we've all heard comments that we're no longer scientists, we're just going to be communicators. Well, I'm here to tell you that could not be any farther from the truth. All of our messaging and collaborative efforts in the future need to be based on the absolute best science available. So that's going to remain not only my mission, but that of many other folks, is to really to dispel that myth and to keep us at the forefront of our scientific expertise as meteorologists. So that concludes the science pillar. I think I can now pass it over to services.
All right, thank you, Bruce. As we've said more than once throughout the roadmap, the provision of DSS is about people. So that's all of you, it's all of us together leveraging science to serve our partners and our communities. So it's about the effectiveness of our operations and our collaboration that empowers your role and decision making. It also empowers the relationships that we build with our core partners and communities. Hopefully, as you consider all the components it takes to successfully provide IDSS, you see your role and your contribution. So today on the services side, we're going to highlight the following initiatives from the roadmap. The CWSU cross-training initiative, Common Logging Platform, WCM, SCH, and Cwsu Teams repository, Watch the Warning Gap Testbed, the IDSS Toolkit Phase 3, and a few miscellaneous roadmap items that we're still working on and where they are as of today. So first, we're going to talk about one of the roadmap projects that was pitched to the Central Region Lead Group for some assistance. The members of this lead group are Carrie Bowen, JJ Wood, and Jimmy Barham. So a big thanks to them for all of their help to make this a success. The CWSU cross-training initiative was created to assist our CWSUs with frequent staffing shortages. After all, it's kind of tough to staff an office with just 3 meteorologists and 1 MIC. People need to go on leave, people get sick, they get promotions, and this is a critical DSS position. Also, cross-training at a CWSU broadens the horizons of forecasters and nearby WFOs and increases familiarity with the non-traditional career path. It's important to note that this program is a volunteer program, and if you're interested, you train to become proficient in CWSU operations. It also goes through some of the tactical requirements of a program like this with travel considerations. How do you get there? Do you get paid for traveling there, and those kinds of considerations. And also there's some pretty great formal collaboration strategies between the CWSUs and the surrounding offices. For more information, take a look at the Central Region All Hands email that Mike Hudson sent back on May 21st, or take a look at our services Google site. So now for an update on the Common Logging Platform project. I was actually able to talk to Matt Davis just yesterday about this. So why is that relevant? Last year, we collected a list of requirements for a shift log. It has to be a one-stop shop for all logging, no more separate DSS log and shift log and rock form. And every time something happens, you have to tell 36 different people and put it in 10 different places. We want to stop all of that and streamline it. It has to be accessible off-site, yet it must be secure. It should replace the rock form, like I mentioned, and provide targeted smart notifications. So if something happens and you think it should be recorded and sent to the MIC and to the rock, you can actually tell it to do that through tagging. So those are just some of the many other requirements. Brian Wallawender happened to be on a call toward the end of the fiscal year last year where the IRIS development team was briefing their logging feature that they were working on. And Brian noted a lot of similarities. So at that point, we decided to join forces and work together with the IRIS and now IMS prototype development team on a solution. The CR Rock will begin using and testing this new logging feature within a few weeks. After I talked to Matt Davis yesterday, he said that the logging feature was actually 100% ready to go. The only thing we need are some authentication tokens to get the Rock folks into it. So after that, additional feedback and requirements will be provided to the IMS IRIS development team for the next 18 months or so, as IMS prototype is rolled out to the field. So Central Region is excited to once again be on the cutting edge of developing the logging feature, and we'll continue to keep you updated. So another roadmap project brought to completion this year was the joint ISD STI project, developing WCM SCH and Cwsu office teams and providing a repository in which these teams can share materials, presentations, and best practices. Joe Moore from Duluth came up with a pretty great idea to have a librarian of sorts assigned to maintain the repository and keep it fresh, because we all know what it's like to develop a repository or use a repository. It starts out real great and then everyone forgets about it. And that's because it becomes stale. So in an effort for it to not become stale, we will have people assigned to take care of it. So we'll continue to develop this idea, and we'll likely have it be a revolving duty of the sub-teams to keep it up to date and refresh the catalog. So stay tuned for more information on that effort. Big thank you goes out to Jeremy Martin, Jeff Colton, and Todd Shea for their major contributions and ideas to this effort. With that update, I will pass this along to Derek Dayrosh for an update on some additional services roadmap projects.
All right, thank you, Kelly. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the watch warning gap testbed that's ongoing now across some offices in Central Region. Just as a brief review, this effort began as a Central Region lead project, spearheaded by John Gordon, with team members of Louis Kanofsky, Jeremy Martin, and Scott Birchbeck. So special thank you to that group. And that team was tasked with investigating potential improvements in the watch warning gap time span. So to conduct that investigation, they consulted with several experts and reviewed some service assessments to better understand the gaps that existed in that time frame. And they came up with a proposal with a list of recommendations submitted to Central Region headquarters. So to test those recommendations in that proposal, 10 offices were selected to participate in this test bed located in Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri. And the aim of that was to test numerous methods for communication aimed at increasing the quantity and quality of information provided to the partners and the general public. So in the past, many offices focus on their external severe weather communications on the time period before and up to the convective watch issuance. And then there's usually a gap in communication followed up by increased communication once the warnings are issued by the offices. So through this effort, the testbed will be striving to seamlessly build on those efforts to communicate forecasts, convective evolution from the time period between the watch and warning issuance, and then all the way through the threat dissipation. So a few things that we're proposing the test offices do are pre-watch AFD mesoscale updates, plain language and technical mesoscale updates in NWS chat, social media posts and graphics, live streaming, and open webinars. So just a brief timeline of where we're at. The testbed began on April 15th. We're in that time period just wrapping up where we're at the midway point to get feedback from partners. And then the testbed will end and wrap up on June 30th with additional partner wrap-up calls and submissions through the 15th of July. And then we'll aim to deliver a final report by the end of the fiscal year. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact the Watch Warning Gap planning team, any of the members there, or visit our Google site, which is linked off of the services Google site, the Central Region ISD Google site. And with that, we'll turn it over to Jake.
Thanks, Derek. This past year was anything but easy, and the quote at the top, "We don't necessarily want new tools, we want better tools," came directly from the field and resonated with the team. Our aim was to provide just that, better tools for the field. We wanted to increase the ability for telework staff, either at home or off-site, to access the latest forecast information in a timely manner. We also wanted to improve the collaboration process in developing and delivering impact-based decision support services. This was the motivation behind the CR IDSS Builder and DSS Packet. These have been shared with the field, and the DSS log is now on Google, meaning it is available offsite. Training for the CRI DSS Builder is available on the CLC, so hopefully you've been able to view that and your office has started testing it, started using it to create DSS material. So what's next? We realize that spring is often a busy season across Central Region, so someone from the CRI DSS team will be reaching out to each office this month to see how implementation is going and offer any assistance that you might need. Then we'll evaluate and improve, which takes us to the next slide. The team continues to receive feedback from the field through the email address shown here. This feedback will be incorporated into the next iteration that is set to be rolled out later this fall. A few items already on the list of improvements are RFC and Cwsu functionality. Also, the ability to incorporate marine forecasts for those offices that provide DSS across the Great Lakes. Finally, we'd like to take the best of the best from offices across the region and add that as well. A couple ideas that have already filtered in and are being worked on is having a loading spinner to show the progress for functions that take several seconds to run. Also adding a bundler capability that will allow offices to build out slides, then save the setup in a folder hosted in the master file. An office could then recall a saved layout at any time or start a new briefing from scratch. This will replace the Start New section from the top drop-down menu. In closing, thank you for embracing the IDSS Builder, and please keep the ideas coming. So with that, I'll send it back to Kelly.
Thank you, Jake. So to wrap up with some ongoing work that the Services Division and the IDSS team are working on, a standard event-ready website has been created for each office, and after recommendations forwarded by the Mountain WCM subregion, it's undergoing some fine-tuning to make it suitable for use as a common dashboard that can be used year-round. The IDSS team is also going through event-ready materials and getting the planning and exercise materials ready for use by the region, including recommendations from the Southeast WCM subregional community to use one-to-many concepts documented and used by their group. We're also rolling out the inclusion of DSS event venues in warnings in July, so that'll be grouped in with a bigger tech order for WarnGen. So look for more information from the test offices and some policy guidance over the next several weeks on that effort. Also last year, a tech order was rolled out to provide offices the ability to plot a radius around an event in AWIP. And then when a storm or lightning would approach that radius, the forecaster would get an alert of the approaching lightning activity so that they could then give a heads up to their event. So the DSS team will incorporate this into future recommendations for office tools that may be useful as we resume outdoor event IDSS season. And finally, the Dss Matrix that Derek Darash has been working on will be finding a home, or it may be incorporated into the national effort that's working toward one common IDSS matrix. And that effort is actually being led by our former Central Region employee, Andy Foster. So we're confident that we'll see that effort wrapped up within the next few months, and it will probably lean heavily on Derek's effort. So with that, that's it for updates from the services side. I will now pass it off to Ed Shimon from the Central Region Culture Team.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Ed Shimon here. We can go on to the next slide. Yeah, there's our group of hardworking folks from management and bargaining unit that have been putting together the initiatives for this roadmap. Today, we're going to be having myself, you can go to the next slide. Myself going to be covering the first part here, the overview of the completed roadmap initiatives. Then I'll pass it on to Audra. She'll cover some of the updates going for the ongoing work. And then Brooke Hagenoff is going to cover the last part there on developed resources and how to utilize those resources in the reintegration process. All right. You know, the culture team was able to complete several initiatives throughout the past fiscal year. We coordinated the establishment of the culture focal points in teams in every office. The culture focal points are going to be kind of our communication vehicle. They're going to take a leadership role in the local culture teams with the premise that leaders drive the culture and kind of culture drives the people. So the teams will establish core values, utilize national and regional teams to help organize and facilitate positive culture initiatives in every office. They're going to provide more frequent opportunities for the staff to routinely think about how they can influence their local culture and how they can improve on a continual basis. And then we've established a lead for every one work group. It's comprised of management and bargaining unit employees that have experience both participating in and conducting the Central Region Lead program. This is only the first step in the process, and as the work group moves forward with a focus on continuing leadership development for all employees. All right, and then we've established roadmap ambassador in every office. We have defined their role as well as the scope and objectives of the program. The roadmap ambassadors will be responsible for supporting and promoting the accomplishment of the roadmap initiatives in our offices, and that is hoped to result in an improved understanding of the CR roadmap initiatives, which will help ensure a successful implementation. A widespread array of feedback was gathered from a vast majority of the Central Region offices, and it helped our team document and share ideas and examples of proactive peer recognition methods. There were many innovative initiatives that have a proven track record, really, of improving office productivity and morale. And we wanted to thank the culture focal points for all their efforts in providing this input. We have provided training to managers on organizational culture and how to audit current office culture and how to hire with culture in mind. Very important focus. We have leveraged multiple initiatives at the regional and national level to support this endeavor, including the Office of Organizational Excellence. And the practices are really already being utilized across the region by many managers. And we have developed and updated the Central Region subject matter expert list. It evolved through a rather detailed vetting process to try and gather that information and provide a focused resource for the entire region to lean on for support in a myriad of subject areas. The full compilation across all the focus groups, teams, and focal points can be found on the Central Region Google site under the home page there, and you can see the link in the blow up. We definitely encourage you to check it out and become more familiar with its content. All right, I'm done with my portion. I'll pass it on to Audra for the ongoing work.
Great, thank you, Ed. So as we round out the remainder of FY21, we still have some culture-related roadmap initiatives that are being worked on. So I'm going to share with you some updates on the ongoing work that we have on those remaining initiatives. One initiative that the culture team continues to work on is the initiative focused on determining how best to promote effective culture change that embraces responsible failure. Back in February, the Central Region Culture Team hosted 3 discussion sessions with all of the local office culture focal points or members of the local office culture team. And then in March, we hosted 3 additional discussion sessions with all of the local office management teams. All of these discussions were focused on learning more about what the various perceptions were on how risk averse we feel we are as a local office, as a region, and as an agency. In these discussions, participants shared positive examples of instances where they observed someone failing responsibly and what the outcomes were of those situations. Participants also brainstormed done to begin to address this idea of embracing responsible failure and how such efforts could potentially impact office culture in a positive way. A few common themes that come up from these discussions, including the impacts that individual preferences and even different management styles can have on an office's risk aversion tendencies. Additionally, a lot of focus was on new employees and their potential risk aversion tendencies as they dive into new forecasting tasks and warning responsibilities. Another key theme that came up was on the importance of building trust and improving overall communication within an office and between staff members. So these themes, as well as other takeaways from these discussions, were shared with senior leadership at Central Region headquarters, and the Central Region Culture team led a discussion session with them on this topic in early May. In this discussion with senior leadership, we discussed their perception of risk aversion within Central Region and brainstormed next steps that we could take over the next 1 to 2 years to assess our risk aversion tendencies and to be open to embracing responsible failure within certain situations and initiatives. So based on the input that we gathered from all 7 of these discussion sessions, the Central Region Culture Team will be creating a lessons learned and recommendations document for Central Region senior leadership, mapping out those next steps that we can take as a region to start embracing more opportunities for responsible failure that can help us improve our innovation and creativity to keep Central Region at the leading edge of change initiatives that ultimately can help to improve and advance our operations. And next, I want to share an update on the ongoing work of the newly established Lead for Everyone work group. So as Ed shared a moment ago, this work group was officially established just this past February with the goal of improving individual and office leadership development across Central Region offices. And it was by bringing key takeaways from the Central Region Lead program to everyone within the region. So far, the work group has established 6 leadership communities across Central Region, aligned with the other communities that we have for MICs and HICs, WCMs and SCHs, and the Sus and Dos. Each community has a representative within the Central Region Lead for Everyone work group, helping to focus the group efforts on the leadership needs of offices within each community. Initial efforts will focus on developing leadership topic months, with a focus on foundational leadership concepts each month, which will then be accompanied by suggested resources that offices can utilize. Additional efforts will focus on developing a one-stop shop for leadership resources that can be shared and used throughout the leadership communities. This is expected to include such things as book lists, links to online book lending libraries such as NOAA Overdrive, media resource links, and discussion questions and discussion topics. So you can expect to see more information on this in the coming months as the work group continues to get these efforts off the ground and as they start engaging more closely with each community to build a strong foundation of leadership across all offices in Central Region. On the next slide, we'll discuss another culture-related roadmap initiative that we're continuing to work on, and it's focused on developing a plan that provides guidance for how to utilize areas of expertise in various operational situations. The Rocky Mountain MIC community group has actually helped to take the lead on this initiative. And in January of 2021, they agreed to support the idea of having a robust schedule of presentations for our Central Region Mountain offices, involving our own sub-regional offices subject matter experts. The purpose of this initiative is to highlight operational best practices, new techniques or philosophies, and strategies for handling various operational challenges. This is a starting point, and obviously any speakers and topics can be added to the pool. Requirements were that all sub-regional offices should be invited to join each presentation, and the MIC community group wanted to ensure that these webinars were well advertised and promoted. Webinars that have been presented, shared, and recorded so far include the NBM probability of weather type testbed at WFO Pueblo, snow squall warnings in Colorado by WFO's Grand Junction and Boulder, high impact, low confidence events at WFO Pueblo, the 2020 Colorado fires by WFO's Grand Junction and Boulder, and heat risk by WFO Salt Lake City. Some future planned webinars include convective season impacts to aviation by the Denver CWSU, the 2020 Colorado derecho by WFO's Grand Junction and Boulder, the 2020 Labor Day Western Wyoming High Wind event by WFO Riverton, the Blowing Snow Sea Star Project by WFO Cheyenne, and the Random Forecast or Forest model. So the Rocky Mountain MIC community group is in the process of developing a white paper highlighting all of these efforts, and hopefully it will assist in the development of other similar efforts in supporting initiatives that focus on better utilizing expertise within. So moving on to the next slide. Work is also ongoing on compiling an updated list of Central Region Office operational schedule rotations with the goal of highlighting office schedules that effectively utilize staff and practice efficient shift distribution strategies that embrace the GS 5 through 12 progression. The repository is built, however, all of the previous data that we had in there was out of date. So we will be building the repository out over the next few months and based on the new CBA and our evolving post-pandemic guidance from NWS headquarters. So stay tuned for more information on that in the coming months. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Brooke Hagenhoff, who will be sharing an overview of some of our culture-related resources that are available for all of our offices to utilize.
Thanks, Audra. So the goal of these initiatives is to provide real, tangible resources that offices can put to good use. We really want this to be more than just checking a box and moving on. So I'm going to go over a number of resources that are already available to use right now. One is just the establishment of culture teams and focal points and the important role that they play in assessing office culture and initiating culture opportunities and activities to improve office culture. We encourage focal points and teams to work with local leadership teams if your office has one, but also take advantage of the larger regional culture focal point and team community. An email, cr.culture-focalpoints@noaa.gov, has been set up to provide a forum for sharing ideas. Remember, we're stronger together, and we have a community in place via this email to support one another. As was previously discussed, we've also established the roadmap ambassadors at each office to increase communication and transparency with respect to roadmap initiatives. Ambassadors will help champion local roadmap rollout and also serve as a valuable resource for the next roadmap, answering questions, ensuring implementation, and opening up communication channels. One resource already available at a national level, go to the next slide, is the OOE Culture Portal, which contains resources to assess local culture, activities for team building, and ways to increase local buy-in, best practices that other offices are already using, and much more. So if you're looking to kickstart a local culture program, this is a good place to start. Culture focal points and teams across the region have come together to share ways that their offices promote peer recognition beyond that formal awards process. And those ideas have been shared with that focal points group for other offices to use and glean ideas from. And as was already mentioned, the Central Region Lead for Everyone work group continues to develop leadership training for office use, and those materials should be available soon, so stay tuned for that. So these are all great resources that you can use now to start making progress on culture initiatives at your office. So this last year has been exhausting for all of us, and that came through loud and clear in the roadmap feedback that was recently collected. As we slowly begin to reintegrate our offices and increase staffing levels, how can we put these resources to use in order to reacquaint ourselves with one another? Now, there are a number of ideas out here. Here are just a few. One is to start planning some social activities this summer to rebuild that sense of community that could have been lost. This could include cookouts or sports activities or a number of other things. Also, remember, if your office has hired new employees in the last year, there's a pretty good chance that they feel pretty disconnected and they certainly don't know everyone very well. There's also a chance that they maybe have not met certain people in the office face-to-face yet. Organizing activities and discussions to get to know one another will help ensure that everyone knows that they're part of the team. This time also provides an opportunity to re-examine our office workflow and make adjustments. If we learned anything this past year, it is that we can quickly adjust to new circumstances, and there are flexibilities in better meeting the needs of our partners and the needs of our own staff. As we begin to increase our in-office staffing numbers, this is a great time to reassess staffing flexibility and discuss opportunities. Do remember, though, if your office is having these discussions, that any adjustments to schedules do still need to go through the lot and local management. So next slide. We're going to use this time as we move forward as a time to really celebrate our coworkers and the work we've done during this difficult year as we begin to reintegrate. So last summer, offices shared ways that they promote positive office culture, both pre-COVID and during COVID. So if you're looking for ways to re-energize your office, take a look at this repository and take a page from the book of your fellow Central Region offices. We've worked harder than ever this year, but it's possible that our informal recognition methods have fallen by the wayside. Now is a great time to revisit this and also highlight the amazing work our coworkers have done lately. If your office does not have perhaps an informal peer recognition process, maybe now is the time to start one. Both of these lists, the Promoting Positive Culture and the Peer Recognition Methods list, were crowdsourced over the past year from Central Region offices, and they have been shared via email with culture teams and focal points. The Central Region Culture Team is also exploring ways to keep these lists on the Central Region Google Sites page for easier access for all Central Region employees, so that these don't live in an email thread and start to get lost in that mountain of email that we all have. So we'll have some updates on this and where you can find that hopefully soon. So as we wrap up here, remember there are a number of ways that we can lean on each other for support and for ideas within our offices. We encourage you to use these resources, reach out with questions, and share ideas. You can contact the Central Region Culture Team at cr.culture@noaa.gov or all culture teams and focal points within Central Region at cr.culture-focal-points@noaa.gov. And now I will wrap up our culture initiative update and hand it back to Scott.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. Greatly appreciate it. A lot of effort put in from folks in the field and headquarters to get this information out, and I thank each and every one of you. We did have at least one question come in, and it was regarding the repository for schedules. Right now, there's a lot of questions. We're waiting for guidance coming out post-pandemic. Currently, we'll see what we are able to add in there. But yes, every type of guidance, everything will be shared that we can possibly share. But again, we've got to look at how the new CBA and how I'll call it the post-pandemic guidance from headquarters comes out, how we can use different scheduling. So no promises on what's in there, just that we've got a lot of work to do to get that updated as we learn more. I don't know of any other questions specifically. We are at the top of the hour. I want to respect your time, so I want to thank everyone again for participating and for attending today. If you have questions, again, submit them through your Roadmap Ambassador, submit them through the intranet site, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you very much.